r/AskReddit by Reddit now. People who have survived school shootings. What was it like? Survivor of the SHS shooting here. I was 9 at the time and in 4th grade. I was in the gym, and we were just going through the normal routine, that is the gym teacher explaining the activity and us participating. I remember it was rope climbing that day and I was so excited. All of a sudden we heard a loud bang noise, and everyone looked towards the door. At first, we shrugged it off as the janitor dropping something in the hallway, but after the second and third bangs, we were ushered into the corner and told to be very quiet while my teacher ran and locked the doors. We were confused but unbothered at first, but the longer it went on the more worried we became. The loudspeaker crackled on and we heard muffled voices and muffled bangs, then silence. Years later I was told it was our principal and the office staff trying to warn us but were killed. By now we're all silently sobbing and holding hands. I remember being very scared but not entirely sure of what. Of course, a school shooting was not the first thing on our minds. Eventually, my teacher told us to crawl across the floor and into a supply closet, where we sat terrified until SWAT and police officers opened the doors and helped us out. We went out one of the back doors and walked the drive to the firehouse, where our parents picked us up and took us home. That experience has changed me forever, and while the effects I had initially, nightmares, anxiety, etc., have lessened, I still feel them. And many others suffer from PTSD, and I don't think a day goes by where I don't think about it. While I did not know everyone who passed personally, I have seen the toll it took on my community and feel for their families and friends deeply. RIP angels, you are loved. I was at UCLA during the shooting in 2016. It was only a disgruntled grad student shooting his advisor and then himself, but we didn't know that at the time. Everyone was assuming it was a mass. I was walking back to my apartment just off campus when the notification went out that there were reports of gunshots and to get inside because campus was locking down. I finished walking home and turned on the news with some friends. I had other friends who were hiding in classrooms. The craziest part was the amount of misinformation going around on social media and in various group messages I was a part of. There were reports of more people shot and multiple shooters in a coordinated attack around various parts of campus and such. I'm not sure how much of that was fabricated maliciously and how much started with someone seeing a plainclothes officer with a gun or something and the story snowballing from there. I called my mom afterward and she started crying. She said she hadn't called me sooner because she didn't want my phone to ring in case I was in hiding. Honestly, really smart of your mom. I'm pretty sure my phone would blow up. I was a student at Virginia Tech during the 2007 massacre. I wasn't directly in the fire or anything, just a student in the dorms. It was very surreal. That morning my friends and I sat in the dorms watching the news evolve on campus. It started off saying 1 or 2 injured. At that point we didn't make too much of the situation. I remember the newscaster saying at one point that the new updates was over 20 fatalities, the final count was 32, and we all just froze. We assumed it was an error. It was not. As the day evolved we reached out to our friends to make sure they were okay, but cell service was very spotty. I had a very uneasy feeling that a somewhat peripheral friend of mine was in danger and tried to text her. It turns out she was shot but survived. Another of our friends was shot and killed. The next few days were strange. Classes were cancelled and many left the campus. President Bush came to speak to us, but I'm sure even he felt helpless with not much to contribute. Eventually, they cancelled the remainder of classes and exams for the semester and we left for the year. The summer was difficult. At my summer job people kept trying to talk to me about the shooting, both co-workers and customers. I don't know why, but I felt okay discussing it with fellow VT students but nobody else, including my other friends and family. I eventually quit that job and got a new one, not telling anyone I was a VT student. Returning to school felt surreal. We did a lot of school spirit activities at football games while Virginia Tech, etc., but it was definitely a different atmosphere. I felt very uncomfortable in lecture halls and whenever my mind went blank I imagined a shooter coming in and killing us. That feeling still persists sometimes. In large groups I'll start thinking about a mass murder occurring. That day, I'll always say, is the day I grew from a child to adult. I changed in ways both positive and negative. I made new bonds with my fellow classmates but felt isolated from some other people. It was definitely the defining experience of my young adulthood. For a long time, I didn't want to talk about these experiences with anyone. Now, I try and speak more openly about it because I am trying to advocate for a better future. I was around for Elliot Rodgers shooting at UCSB. There are a few things that I remember being surprising. 1. The sense of humor. This was not everyone, but I remember a couple people making finger gun gestures at each other. I think this is because the event lasted a while and spread over the Isla Vista area, so there was a general discomfort wherever you were. I think people were coping with the stress however you could. Gallows humor, basically. 2. The awkwardness of trying to console someone who just saw their friends shot or were shot at themselves. If you have ever been in a social situation where you didn't know what to say, add in the fact that whatever you say might permanently affect the life of the person you are talking to. 3. Your school is now famous for this. Although this was during a time that school shootings weren't super common, so that might be changing. Lived in the same dorm, Manzanita, as two of the victims. One being across the hall from my room. Seeing the parents get escorted to their children's rooms was goddamn haunting. During the actual shooting, I was in downtown SB at a birthday dinner. We were getting calls and texts from many of our friends not to come back to the area as it was happening. It was really scary. Everyone was panicking and running into the nearest classroom, and I ended up getting locked out of every room. I was out in the open with a shooter who could come from any direction. My teacher, amazing guy, looked out and saw me sitting in the middle of the hallway, silently crying. The hall was dead silent, and I heard a click and nearly screamed, thinking it was the shooter cocking a handgun. I looked up and realized my teacher had popped the door open a tiny bit. I ran fast as into the class, about to pass out from fear, and my teacher just held on to me the whole time. After everything went down, nobody got hurt, except the shooter, who took 3 bullets in the leg from the cops. My teacher almost got fired for jeopardizing 31 kids' lives to save one. But the school held a petition and he got to keep his job. That must have been so scary, I can't even imagine. May I ask how old you were? 14-year-old female. I was in the room when one student shot another at our high school then ran out of the building. This was the 80s so there was no lockdown procedure. We all just left the building in various states of shock. I never felt threatened, so it really didn't affect me too badly. The victim lived and the shooter spent several years in the Indiana Youth Center with Mike Tyson and one of my best friends from high school. That's a bizarre sentence for you. I go to Saugus High School and was at school during the most recent school shooting that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'll start from the beginning. I got to school at probably around 7:10 because I am Mormon, so I had a class called seminary, basically Bible study, and so we ended and I walked to school. I walked in and went towards the back of campus-ish, but I could still see where it took place in the quad. I'm just chilling there with my friends when I look over and see some kid walking really quickly towards the middle of the quad, and it happened so quickly he was crying, I think. He ripped his backpack around and I just knew there something was wrong. He reached in and shot a girl in front of him. I won't say her name but I knew her quite well, and she was instantly dead I'm pretty sure at that point. I don't remember much. I just ran and I ran and I ran and I ran until I collapsed on the sidewalk outside of school and some parent came and helped me up. Scariest moment of my life. I knew the kid that was the shooter. I knew the girl that died. I knew one of the injured. I'm still dealing with it today and it has honestly made me so scared a chair fell and I just sat in my room for a couple hours. I hope no one ever has to deal with anything like that ever. I was in the STEM shooting. We heard 5 shots and sat in a corner for a little while. Then some yelling, I heard some guy moaning, in pain, outside. Then a bullet came through the wall and scratched my friend. We left to another corner, then there were 2 more shots. I was texting friends and family and my friend texted me, wanna play 8-ball pool. The cops removed us, there was blood in the halls, we stood around in the cold for a couple hours. A friend of mine got shot in the leg 3 times, though she's okay now, both of them are. My friend texted me, "Wanna play 8-ball pool?" I understand this was traumatic and not a laughing matter at all. But goddamn, that made me laugh. I was laughing hard. It's all good. Yippee, you've made it all the way to the end. While you're here, you may as well subscribe and click on one of the recommended videos. After all, it doesn't cost a thing. Wubba dubba dub dub.